Hey guys, and welcome to another Psych-based video. Today we're going to cover the theory of reconstructive memory. As always, the spec is on the screen. We're going to run through the key terms, the theory in general, some past paper questions, and even a little Block-It game at the end. Let's get into it. So firstly, it's important to understand that the theory of reconstructive memory is kind of an opposing theory to the multi-store model. It doesn't directly oppose it. No one ever said, oh, we're opposing the multi-store model. But it's important that we understand that unlike the multi-store model, which says that our mind and our memory works a bit like a computer, the theory of reconstructive memory actually takes into account human nature. And it says that in reality, our memories are really unreliable. We can't really trust them. And that is the theory basically summed up. So in order to understand the theory, these are the key terms we're going to need to know. And we're going to go through all of them now. Once we put all those key terms together and that understanding, you've got everything you need to know about the theory. So firstly, a bit like Piaget's theory, we have to understand what schemas are. Schemas are a mental representation of an object or a situation, okay? And it tends to be based on our prior experience. So whatever you guys are experiencing, whatever you guys are learning, you will build up a schema of that stuff. When you're a child, you learn loads of schemas about things. Like you will learn what an animal is, and then you'll be able to categorize animals, and then you'll be able to put dogs into your four-legged animal schema. So think of schemas as like a big filing cabinet of all of the stuff you know and being able to represent them and categorize them, etc. Now, you also need to understand the role of experience and expectation on memory. Let's start with experience. Now, your experiences can have a huge influence on your memory, your prior experiences. And what this means is your memory of events that might have happened may not be accurate. To give you an example, a few years ago, I went to Prague, absolutely beautiful city. A year later, I went to Budapest, another stunning city. Both of them are Central European cities, and there are a lot of similarities between them when you look at it. And what that means is, now that that's 5-6 years ago, I get those two holidays mixed up all the time. I went to an absolutely lovely rooftop restaurant, and I can't tell you which holiday that was in. So this is how the role of your experiences can affect your memories. You can get your experiences all mixed up, and this shows that your memories can be really unreliable. Next, the role of expectation on our memory. Well, your expectations can normally help you, okay? They help you to make swift judgments about how to act in certain situations. They might not always be right, but they can help you. However, the thing is, these expectations can also really affect your memory. To give you an example, I want you to think about maybe a teacher or a lesson that you don't like that much. Now, I know that's really difficult because you love school so much, but I just want you to imagine that you don't like one of your lessons. Picture the scene. Let's say a year ago, you had an amazing lesson with that teacher. Let's say it was on March 15th, and somebody said to you a year later, they said, do you remember that lesson we did last year on March 15th? It was actually a really good lesson, weren't it? Because of your expectations of what would have happened in that lesson, because you don't like that teacher, you might say, no, awful lesson, hated it, hate that teacher. In reality, you might have had a really good lesson, but your expectations of what would have happened with that teacher influenced your memory. And likewise, going forward, it has an influence. If you see a teacher that looks really strict and really stern, then you might not react very positively to them because students might assume that they're really strict, and that's going to affect your memories of them and the memories you create about them. So that's how experience and expectation can affect your memory. You could get asked a question in an exam that asks about them separately, so please make sure you do understand the differences between them and how they influence your memory. All of this can lead to something called confabulation. One of my favorite words in psychology. Confabulation simply means that you lie, but you're not lying on purpose. It's an accident. Confabulation means you're kind of getting confused. You're making up a memory or changing a memory without realizing that you're doing it. We've all had this experience. You know, you're talking to your friend about something that happens, and somebody else who was there is next to you. As you explain what happens, your friend goes, hold on, that's not how it went, and they explain something differently. And you're sure that you weren't lying, but turns out you weren't telling the truth. This is called confabulation. You're not lying on purpose, but your memories are clearly inaccurate, and your mind has just filled in the gaps. This leads to distortion, the idea that a memory might differ from what actually happened. Our memories have become distorted. Think about it. If something is distorted, it's twisted, it's out of shape, it's not right. That's a distortion of your memory as well. And then finally, you need to have a very brief understanding of the effect of leading questions. This is simply a question where you try and influence the answer in the way that you ask the question. For example, a normal question might be, where were you on the night of the 11th? That's what maybe a police officer might ask a criminal. Whereas a leading question would be, why were you at the cinema on the night of the 11th where the murder happened? You can see hopefully by asking a question like that, you're almost trying to influence an answer and you're suggesting that they were there. Another example of a leading question would be something like, don't you think it's a great idea to subscribe to PsychSpace? That's trying to suggest that it's a good idea to subscribe to PsychSpace, which, by the way, it is. Now, as always, we've got to be able to criticize the theory, and the most important criticism, because it's actually named on the spec, is that it's reductionist. Because it's named on the spec, they can ask you, explain why the theory of reconstructive memory is reductionist. And the answer to that is because it focuses on how we create schemas and we reconstruct our memories, but it fails to explain how these things actually happen in the brain. It takes something really complicated, in this case, our entire experiences of our memories, and it simplifies it down to just a few key terms and the idea that our memories are unreliable and they confabulate. In reality, memory is way more complicated than this, so it could be argued to be very reductionist. A strength, however, is that it's supported by a really solid lab study by Braun, Ellis and Loftus. If you want a full video on that, please let me know in the comments. As always, we come onto our exam zone, the part where we go through a real past paper question. I'll give you a few seconds to answer it before I put my answer on the screen.
Perfect.
And this is the sort of thing we're after. As you can see, you've got to be really specific to the theory of reconstructive memory. And with that, that's the theory done. Hopefully you feel nice and confident on it now. If you've got any questions, please drop them below. Otherwise, a like and subscribe goes a long way.